Welcome to Animeverse Fanfics, a realm where your favorite anime characters step into untold adventures. Here, stories come alive through voice, animation, and pure imagination. This is just the beginning of our journey together. Now, let's dive into part 3 of Another Me I Haven't Met, starting right from Chapter 9. Chapter 9, another filler chapter, sorry? Menma sighed in contentment, letting the golden rays from the setting sun caress what little skin he had on display, stretching his subtly burning muscles as they made their way back from training. That had been exactly what he needed. It felt like an annoying itch in the back of his mind had finally been scratched with all the sparring and chakra use. He could tell that Boru was also grateful to get out of the house, even for just a short while. Despite Naruto's best efforts to make them feel welcome, the house still felt like some form of enemy territory. A place where one must always remain vigilant and careful. But out here, walking through the luscious forests of their village, it was much easier to breathe the fresh air and let the tension flow out of you. In fact, if Menma ignored the chakra signatures walking with them, he could almost pretend that him and his twin were home. That they could go to their house and hear their siblings' shrieks of delight, cuddle up to Papa and bask in his warm barely their touches, and absorb all the happiness from Mama's brilliant smiles. Just the thought of it made Menma's grin widen, and his steps lighten. Despite all the good feelings and pleasant aches, both brothers felt tense. For they were not alone. There was someone following them. At first it had taken a while for the twins to notice. Whoever they are, they're good at keeping their presence scarily subtle. But as the high of their winds settled, their awarenesses expanded. Unfortunately, this didn't help much. Just because the twins could sense that the chakra was there, doesn't mean that the chakra was potent enough to try and identify its owner. It was fleeting, there one moment, gone the next. The shinobi was skilled, very skilled. Through observation, the twins had determined that Boruto had no idea of the third party. Naruto, however, was much more difficult to read. He didn't seem, at least not outwardly, to notice the eyes on the group, yet it felt almost laughable to believe that a shinobi of his caliber wouldn't have picked up something like this, which meant he was probably the one who instructed said eyes to be there. At that realization, the twins' BLD changed into something exquisitely thin and icy. What had they done wrong? Menma in particular felt like stomping his feet in frustration and cussing out the Sage of Six Paths himself. They had planned everything out meticulously, thought of every eventuality, were careful in each step they took. What more could anyone ask for? This was all made worse by the fact that Boru's nervous panic, while invisible to others, was painfully obvious to him. But he couldn't do a single thing to help calm his twins' anxiety without practically announcing to their observer that they knew they were there. So, if Menma was even more loud and obnoxious than usual during the trip back to the house, Boruto could keep his scoffs and glares to his goddamn self. Dinner, surprisingly, had turned out to be a rather quiet affair. Boruto was still sulking after his loss and Naruto seemed to be lost in his own thoughts, while Kawaki just preferred to keep quiet sometimes, which left Hinata and Himawari to carry the conversation, the latter doing so with an immeasurable amount of glee, gladly soaking up all the attention from those around her. After arguing with Hinata about the dishes and who should do them for a few minutes, the twins reluctantly accepted defeat and made their way upstairs to go to bed. Though neither were able to sleep until much later. Both had this sinking feeling that something was going to go wrong. Start of day 3, Boru couldn't help the small smile dancing playfully across his lips. It had been a good day thus far. Both twins had slept in a bit, chatting mindlessly to each other as they slowly woke up, before leisurely going about their morning routines. It was the kind of relaxing morning that became rarer and more sought after as one advanced through the shinobi ranks. Granted, the twins were still chunin, Boru knew that their schedule would get much busier in the future. But he liked to think that even as a genin he would still long for more mornings like this. There was just something special about spending the first hours of the day in a half-asleep daze with his other half. But they couldn't stay isolated in this room forever. Begrudgingly, the twins slowly meandered down the stairs to the breakfast they had been called down to. As Boru drew closer to the dining room, he felt as the nerves from yesterday came creeping back to the forefront of his mind. Slowly overpowering the warm haze that had saturated the morning, like a layer of clouds rolling in and blocking the sun. There was no prior plan for what the twins would be doing today, which only really served to heighten Boru's anxiety. They had clearly done something wrong, or at the very least suspicious, to warrant the surveillance of the day before, and without any planned activities, the teen wouldn't be able to distract himself from the fear gripping his heart. Had they gone too far with the spars yesterday? Were they being trailed because they proved themselves to be bigger threats than initially anticipated? Would their trail leave once they proved that they held no ill intention towards the village? What if Boru was saved from his hurricane of uncertainty by a hand gripping his own, startling slightly? He realized that he currently stood with his twin just outside of the dining room, hands intertwined. He squeezed the hand before releasing it and entering the room, scared that those inside would notice his pause but knowing his twin would pick up on his gratitude. During breakfast, it was explained to the twins that Boruto would be going out with his friends while Himawari and Hinata would be going to the Hyuga compound for training. Seeing an opening, the twins immediately started asking Hima questions about her training. Trading fond smiles with the rest of the family as the little girl babbled on and on about possibly everything she had learned since her training began, with ample encouragement from the twins, who were trying to avoid being the center of attention for as long as they could. Even asking Kawaki what he would be doing in a last desperate attempt when Hima eventually ran out of steam and despairing when he replied that he simply wanted some alone time. The useless, moody BSTRD. After the meal was finished, the other occupants quickly departed, leaving only Naruto and the twins in the dining room. Usually this wouldn't really bother them. Out of everyone in the house, Naruto was probably the individual that they had bonded with the most, however the Hokage seemed to have a discussion planned out for them, which, when paired with the surveillance, likely spelled trouble for the twins. So, Naruto began, and Menma could feel how tense his twin already was, irrespective of the fact they had barely even started. I really hope you don't mind, but I've made some plans for us today. He paused after that statement, clearly waiting for a reaction from the teens in front of him before he'd be willing to continue. Not at all. We were getting pretty bored anyway. Menma replied for the two of them, the comment said in the playful way that would either amuse or annoy him. Naruto relaxed minutely before scratching the back of his neck with a smile in that oh-so-familiar sheepish way of his. Sorry about that. I realize that it must be hard to go from being a chunin with missions to essentially being reduced to a civilian lifestyle. It's not that bad actually. Boring. Yes. But it has also been quite nice to have a break and just laze about. Boru shrugs, trying to ease Naruto's guilt and show that they feel comfortable with their surroundings. After all, suspicion, in the end, would only be met with even more suspicion. A little trust could go a long way. Naruto grinned playfully. I'm glad to hear it. Though I'm afraid there may not be much time for relaxation today. He stated lightly, flawlessly transitioning from small talk into the main topic, showing off his more diplomatic side. The twins, in turn, disregarded the previous flippancy to match the new stern atmosphere. There are two things that we need from you two dash, the Hokage started, but upon noticing the tension coming from the teens added, it's nothing crazy I promise. He waited for the twins to calm before continuing. Firstly, we would like to assess your fighting skills and capabilities. I don't mean to offend, but none of us expected you two to be quite as proficient as you proved yourselves to be, and we would like to see what else you can do. Boru and Menma exchanged a glance. Not the most comfortable of requests, but one that was expected. They had confirmed that they could be a threat in a fight, and it is only natural that Naruto would want to figure out exactly what they were dealing with. They would have to hide their Sharingans of course, but other than that, neither twin had any problems with showing off. And the second thing? Menma inquired, turning back to face the Hokage. Well, Shika would like to know more about the village you two come from. Nothing too confidential, just an idea of your resources, economic situation and your leadership so that we can work on drafting a trade or alliance contract. I can't promise we'll be much help there. Menma joked. Naruto huffed with a small smile. All we wish is for you to share what you're comfortable with. I'm sure you know that Shika is pretty good at connecting dots and filling in gaps. Alright then, that's all we need to do. Boru prodded lightly, trying to gain as much information as he could so that he and Menma would be more prepared. Naruto grimaced, not quite. He seemed to contemplate for a moment before steeling himself and continuing. We want to be thorough, which will of course take more time, and I really don't want to make you guys work on your last day here. So, I was thinking that maybe you could split up. Naruto said that last part slowly as if knowing that it would not go over well. Chapter 10. Separated. As Boru dodged the latest barrage of kunai launched his way, he couldn't help but mentally give himself a pat on the back. The test was challenging, certainly above the level of skill he had required to defeat Sarada, but he had yet to actually need his Sharingan yet. Boru inserted a sliver of chakra into the ground, creating a wall of earth to protect him from the water attack that had been sent his way. This pride was foolish. He knew these tests were designed to get harder the more he succeeded. And if the slightly malicious look on Konohamaru's face was anything to go by, he wasn't scared to push Boru to his limits. The anticipation of what would soon be an extremely treacherous battle made the distinctly Menma-shaped hole in his defenses all the more noticeable. He didn't need his twin to fight. After all, one of Papa's favorite sayings were, "There's a big difference between teamwork and codependency." And neither Papa nor Mama would ever allow their children to be caught ill-equipped for a battle. But unfortunately, Boru still felt far more secure in his abilities with his other half at his side. The fact that this is also the first time they had been separated in this universe only served to tug on Boru's heartstrings even more. He allowed the anger of being taken away from his twin to flood his body for a moment, giving him the energy to dive to the side as Konohamaru sent a Rasengan hurtling towards him. He was also starting to run low on chakra. That thought came with a small pang of shame, despite how Boru knew he had absolutely nothing to be ashamed of. They had been at it for the last 2 hours after all. However, one didn't improve if they were content with their performance, and as much as he loathed to admit it, his anxiety was one of the biggest motivators he had to get better, even if it made him want to curl up into a ball of violently shaking nerves most days. Something about pressure turning a diamond to a pebble. Admittedly, it was one of the pieces of advice that Boru made fun of rather than heeding. His only saving grace at this point was that neither Naruto nor Konohamaru had noticed that his reaction time was far slower than it was the day before, because of the Sharingan. Konohamaru paused briefly, giving the teen a chance to catch his breath. As he wiped away the few stray rivulets of sweat making their way down his forehead and lifted the blonde locks of hair brushing the bottom of his neck to help the breeze to cool him down, he allowed himself to wonder how Menma was holding up. Menma whistled a jaunty little tune as he skipped towards the torture and interrogation building. He spared a brief thought to the odd location but in the end shrugged it off. Who was he to decide where their meeting place would be? This place was probably selected because of Auntie Ino. He wouldn't be surprised if they asked him to look into the he had memories of his home, though he definitely wouldn't be agreeing to that without at least a few rules and safeguards being put in place. The mind walk technique was something that deeply unsettled both him and his twin. The idea of someone having access to the thoughts and opinions that they didn't speak felt like a violation. Menma believed that he would actually find it preferable to be flayed like a fish, rather than allow for himself to be forced into that level of vulnerability. Boru would feel the same way. His smile dimmed slightly as a few ugly pieces of anger contaminated his good mood. Even under regular standards he preferred to stay with his twin. They came into the world as a package deal, so why would that change as they grew up? There isn't a single person who Menma enjoys the company of more than Boru. As the building drew closer he took a few deep, calming breaths. The situation wasn't ideal, nowhere near. But obsessing over his twin's absence would only make him miss the other more. If he focused on the present, he would be with his twin again before he knew it. With that thought, his mood soon brightened up, his joy once again pure. He merrily made his way into the building, greeting the Yamanaka woman behind the front desk with all the cheer of someone who was on cloud nine. She gave a laugh before directing him to where he would be having his interrogation. With Uncle Shika. Kind of, maybe Uncle Shika, except not really. When he entered the room, the Nara was already waiting for him. Menma gave an animated wave and took his seat opposite the man, taking in the standard bland gray room around him with no decorations or distractions. The lack of visual stimulation paired with the still calmness of the man in front of him made his body buzz with the urge to fiddle, just to give him something to focus on. Shikamaru seemed to pick up to the teen's restlessness and took pity. "So, did Naruto tell you about what we'd be doing today?" he asked with a slight tilt to his head. Menma's attention leaped to the question, immediately drawn to the only stimulating thing in his vicinity like a moth to flame. As he processed the question he gave a sheepish smile, his hand moving to lightly tug at the black locks of hair brushing the bottom of his neck. "A little. Just that you guys wanted to know about our village." The Nara nodded slowly. "That just about covers what you and I will be doing for the next while, yes. Is there anything you need before we get started? You will of course be allowed to take breaks." He continued in that same bored, monotonish way. "Nope. I'm all good to go." Menma chirped with a beam, moving his hands to his sides and forcing them to stay still there. He didn't want to risk his untamable energy being interpreted as nerves. He didn't have anything to hide, he was among friends. "Good," Shikamaru stated simply as he reached into the small bag and pulled out a small stack of papers that looked very important. "Let's get started then." The next hour passed painfully slowly for the teen. As much as he tried to be helpful and answer every boring as F question to the best of his ability, he still felt like he wasn't being useful enough, not saying enough. He was a fly in the room at this goddamn point, just watching as Shikamaru did everything and made huge invisible connections that the rest of us plebeian creatures couldn't even begin to see. Is this what being around Naras was always like? Sure, Boru and Menma were pretty close with Shikadai. Their Shikadai at least dash, but he always just seemed content to spectate in group settings and occasionally jump in with a sarcastic quip. It never felt like this. Did Menma realize that he was going on a mental tangent and likely losing his sanity? Yes, he did. Sue him. He had been in this boring gray room at this boring gray table on this boring gray chair, watching as Shikamaru got lost in his thoughts for a few forevers at a time, briefly taking breaks to ask another question he couldn't answer before zoning out again. For the last 2 hours, he should have been born a horse. At least then he would be able to spend his miserable life running through fields and feeling the wind in his hair, and oh how he was practically burning with the need to run around. That stress-free fun lifestyle was starting to sound real good right about now. Menma momentarily stopped his bitching to be thankful that he couldn't run out of breath when ranting in his head. He should do this more often. God, he missed Boru. If he was here then Menma could just annoy him for entertainment, but no. Shikamaru rolled his neck a bit and let out a relieved sigh. Apparently resurfacing from whatever train of thought he'd been lost down for the last 20 minutes. The team perked up slightly, ready to absorb whatever STMLTN he could, like a flower soaking up the first few rays of sunlight in the morning. He needed action. Something. Anything. Okay. For the next part I'm going to need to fetch a few documents from the Hokage building. I must have forgotten to bring them down. With that he stood, lightly stretched his back and left. That was pathetic. At least as far as entertaining conversations go. Also a bit suspicious. Weren't Nara supposed to be super smart? The fact that he forgot something that they needed to go through was out of character. On the other hand, there could be many explanations for that. Maybe he just didn't think that whatever he was fetching would be covered during his interrogation. He also could have simply forgotten. Just because you were smart didn't mean that you couldn't make mistakes sometimes. Bang! Menma jumped and spun, instinctively ready for a fight as the door to his room slammed shut. When he saw his assailant he froze. All of the wind promptly abandoning his sails. Sasuke Uchiha. Not the one that he loved with his whole heart, the one that was an endless pillar of strength and support, the one that would kill and die just to keep Menma safe. No. This one felt cold. It wasn't just the detached but firm gaze he had trapped the teen in either. His chakra pulsed with an icy kind of distrust, so frigid that it threatened to burn him if he got too close. It made Menma terrified and distraught all at once. Terrified because he knew that he was in the presence of a very powerful shinobi, one that was angry, and distraught because this man that looked and felt just like his father, bore none of the warm, loving feelings his father always had in surplus for him. It felt like rejection. And it hurt. I can guess by your expression that you know who I am. He stated in an apathetic tone, slowly, but surely, making his way to the seat that Shikamaru had vacated 5 minutes earlier. Menma gave a sharp nod, schooling his features and mentally cursing himself for allowing the other man to get a good read of his facial expressions. Sasuke Uchiha, sir. Uchimaki. The teen replied in a stead voice that he willed not to shake. The Uchiha sat and gestured for Menma to do the same. He did. Up close it was easier to pick out the differences between this man and his papa. His hair was shorter, not by much, and was hanging over one side of his face, hiding the rinnegan that Menma knew lay beneath. He also looked haggard. He had massive bags under his eyes that gave the impression that he hadn't slept properly in a week. His skin also looked a ghostly sort of pale, not only missing the slight tan that his papa always seemed to magically have but also the light dusting of pink in his cheeks that never went away when he was near mama. Under any other circumstances, it would have made Menma feel sad for the man, but now it only made him more tense. The Uchiha didn't seem to be in a friendly chat sort of mood. And you are? He continued without looking away from him for a second. Menma felt a small flicker of defiance pulse inside him. He wasn't sure if it was stupidity or some last-ditch attempt at convincing himself he wasn't in any danger. Regardless of its reason, it was there and he planned to take full advantage. He briefly considered calling for Mama but decided to hold off on it, for now. He'd be okay hopefully. I'm sure you already know, sir. The teen replied with as much assertiveness as he could muster. The Uchiha's single visible eye narrowed. Remind me, he ordered lowly. Screw confidence. Menma Uchimaki, sir. H.N. Uchimaki. A strange name. He said with a lazy tilt to his head, continuously keeping his unnerving stare on Menma. The teen could feel his hands getting clammy. It's an abbreviated version of my full name, sir. I'm afraid that I'm not willing to explain further. Why wasn't Boru here? He was so much better at masking his fear. While Menma just felt like crying, goddammit. This is why he doesn't let himself get captured and why he lets Boru do the talking in these situations. Perfect, it just so happens that there's something else I'd like you to explain. The man said with the most fake and predatory smile that the teen had ever seen. What? I'd like you to explain to me why you have the Sharingan. Menma froze under the gaze of Sasuke Uchiha's Sharingan eye. Mama. Get here NOWWW. Meanwhile with Shikadai, Uchimaki. Uchimaki, Uchimaki, Uchiha. Maki Maki Maki, Uzumaki. Uchiha Uzumaki. Emoem. Dad. Chapter 11. Confrontation. Boru's head snapped up as his heart stuttered, from where he was leaning against a tree. Konohamaru had graciously shown him some mercy and allowed for all of them to take a break in a shady area near the forest, which was where he had been. Simply laying against a nice big comfy oak tree in contented silence, occasionally listening as Naruto and Konohamaru spoke amicably amongst themselves. That was until he felt it, like a bolt of lightning striking through his body, ensuring he was instantly alert. Fear. So much of it that Boru's heart started pounding, adrenaline flooding into his system. That was until he realized that it wasn't coming from him. Why was Menma scared? He was only supposed to be talking with Shikamaru about the village. Of course, Boru had not been that quick to trust and had been keeping a close eye on his twin's chakra, just in case. Over time, the constant stream of boredom made him feel safe enough to lower his guard, and he had stopped paying attention in order to focus on his own problems, like Konohamaru delightedly trying to kill him, homicidal BSRD. But then Menma had reached out, calling for help from Mama through the link that they shared with their parents and some of their siblings. Frantically, Boru had gone back to check his chakra again, only to find that his twin was terrified, with hints of shock also mixed in there. Boru, is everything all right? Naruto gently asked. Only then did the teen remember that he was not alone. Turning his head, he found that both Naruto and Konohamaru were looking at him with varying degrees of worry. I need to go, he stated firmly, getting up and preparing to run to his twin's aid. Suddenly Naruto was in front of him, blocking his way. Whoa, what's going on? He asked worriedly, waving his hands around placatingly after catching Boru's evil eyes. My twin needs me, I've got to go. He ground out through his gritted teeth. Naruto was wasting his goddamn time when his twin could be in serious danger. Hey kid, calm down. Boru felt his anger boiling up, like a volcano preparing to spew its magma and decimate all nearby civilization. No one in the history of forever has ever calmed down after being explicitly told to. No wonder why Boruto was so angry all the time. But Naruto just stood there, unflinching and unconcerned in the face of Boru's fury. He knows something. He had to. That's the only explanation. He would never allow them harm, especially when they were here to help build peace. What did you do? Naruto froze at the icy tone directed towards him. The teen noticed Konohamaru also tensing up out of the corner of his eye. They both knew. It's nothing bad, I assure Dash. Naruto began in what he probably thought was a calming tone of voice, only to be cut off by Boru. If it's nothing bad, then why is my twin absolutely terrified? Boru's voice was getting louder. He knew he should be trying to stay calm, but he just couldn't right now. Not when his other half needed him. All we need is a bit of information. It might be a little uncomfortable for him to speak about, but it will be better for everyone once we understand the situation. The Uzumaki explained, desperately trying to de-escalate. Silence stretched between them, but it was anything but comfortable. It roiled and twisted between them, morphing with the increasing tension that seemed to gather between the blondes. Would our dad agree with you? Boru asked in a deceptively soft voice. A sick weed of satisfaction sprouting in his heart when he saw Naruto go a little pale. There's no need to bring this to his attention. It's only a minor, it's too late. What? Menma and I have linked our chakras to our dad and the rest of our family, we can communicate through them. And I hate to break this to you, but I have not been keeping tabs on my twin's emotions this whole time. The reason I know of his distress was the fact that he called for our dad. He is on his way, and he won't be happy. Now I'm going to my twin. You might want to come along, it's where you'll find my dad after all. With that, Boru inserted chakra into his legs and started sprinting towards the T&I building. A cruel, vengeful part of him hoped that Mama got there first. Naruto was in his office, sifting through a pile of documents that he was almost positive was multiplying every time he glanced the other way. That was the only possible explanation. Stupid breeding forms of soul-sucking complaints. Taking on Shikamaru and Niji as his aides was easily one of the best decisions of his life. Without them, he wouldn't even be able to leave the office with the amount of work that needed completion. He knew that it was still early in the day, but he was already counting down the hours to go home. It was just one of those days where he wanted nothing more than to be in bed with his husband and kids, despite how he's aware that their bed would not even fit half of their gremlins. A pang of sadness tinged his heart as he remembered that he was missing 2 of his kids at home. People are always going on about how heartbreaking it is to watch your kids grow up and become independent. But call Naruto crazy, he did truly think that with the sheer number of kids he and Sasuke were running after on a daily basis, he wouldn't notice 1 or 2 being taken off his plate. Hell, there was a part of him that believed that he would be relieved at the diminished workload. He was wrong. So unbelievably and unequivocally wrong. Boruto and Menma's absence was like a wooden stake that had struck straight through his heart, painfully twisting every time he was reminded that they weren't here. He was beyond excited to see them again in 2 days. And until then he was just going to have to give the rest of his gremlins some extra loving to make up for the loss. Mama. Get here NOWWW. The papers he was holding fluttered to the floor. Naruto immediately spread out his senses to check on the twins. Boris seemed alright, if a little nervous and upset, but Menma. He was completely terrified. F. He turned to Shikamaru and Niji, both of whom were already looking at him, their attention drawn by the dropped papers. Hold down the fort. He ordered, not even waiting for the confirmation he knew was coming before stretching out and inserting his chakra into the Hiraition seal in their house. In the blink of an eye, he found himself in his and Sasuke's bedroom. Not wasting a second, he sprinted to the kunai pouch he kept in his bedside table, stopping for only a moment to pick up his husband's sword to save time. He sent a quick explanation to Kawaki, Sakura and Kakashi through their chakra. Just so that there was someone to look after the kids if they took longer than anticipated, not forgetting to quickly jump into his mindscape to check that Kurama was awake. If things went south, he might need the fox's help. Sasuke. I know. I'm coming. Naruto couldn't help but tap his foot anxiously while he waited. Every cell in his body was screaming at him to get to the twins now. But he needed Sasuke not only because they were his kids too, but also because he needed backup, and there was no one he would rather have by his side. Calm down, kid. We'll get there in time. We better. It felt like forever before Sasuke appeared in the doorway, even if he realistically knew that it couldn't have been more than a few seconds at most. Sasuke was just as desperate to leave as he was. Naruto handed him his sword and allowed the raven to pull him closer by his waist and press their foreheads together. Let's go get our boys. Naruto didn't need more than that, already pushing his chakra into the seal he had made sure to always keep on himself, sending the couple hurtling through space towards their children. Shikamaru leaned against a wall outside the interrogation room, where he had just subjected the kid to a pissed-off Sasuke Uchiha, smoking his cigarette. He had been mostly clean since they had found out about Temari's Pyarjin and CY. Partly to ensure that both his wife and child remain in optimum health, mostly because Tem thought it was a dirty habit and was already a few bad days away from beating him to a bloody pulp because of it. That infuriating, troublesome, gorgeous, incredible woman. That being said, Shikamaru did occasionally smoke when he was stressed or convinced that something was about to go horribly wrong, such as right now. Admittedly, a lot of that foreboding aura could be traced back to his guilt. Ever since having his own child, the idea of a child being interrogated, or involved in the shinobi world in general, was usually accompanied by it. He could push past it, of course he could. It was the steel that came with being a shinobi. Rising through the ranks required much more than just skill, you needed to have the stomach for it. What good was a powerful shinobi who was too kind to wield that power? The logical, rational part of his brain knew that this was their best course of action. The existence of the Sharingan raised far too many questions. Were the eyes his? In that case, it would mean that Menma is an Uchiha descendant, likely one from the main family, for the Jujutsu to be inherited despite being a half BLD. However, that would also mean that Boruto is an Uchiha. Unless they aren't actually twins. With a puff of smoke, Shikamaru conceded that this most likely wasn't the case. Not only do they look remarkably alike, which could be a coincidence, but they also both have heterochromia. Now he is not a doctor. But he has looked enough people in the eyes over his lifetime to know that having 2 different eye colors is far from common. This of course would imply that Boruto could have the Sharingan too. Alternatively, the eyes aren't his. Which would mean that this other universe was grave robbing the Uchiha. A distinctly repulsing thought. Also, the reason why they were prying the answers out of the child. It was far easier than attempting to get answers from the adults in political negotiations. If they were stealing the eyes, they wouldn't admit to it. The adults would be better at lying as well. Jujutsu theft is still a remarkably sensitive subject around the leaders in Konoha due to the actions of Danzo Sasuke in particular. And it would be a complete deal-breaker. No matter how attractive a multi-universe alliance was, Naruto wouldn't under any circumstances allow the village to be aligned with those who were willing to stoop to the worst taboos of shinobi culture for a little more power. The Nara sighed, delighted and soothed by the light buzz the nicotine provided. Like clouds of pleasant sensation rolling in and fogging his mind, enough to ease his sharp edges without compromising him in the slightest, especially with the tolerance he built up from chain smoking in his teen years. Unfortunately, his instincts were still heightened. As much as he longed to just float and ignore them. These were the instincts that single-handedly got him through the Fourth Great Shinobi War. He knew better than to doubt them. Something was coming. What a drag. He should have stayed in bed with his wife. Naruto and Sasuke appeared in the training ground where this whole fiasco began in a blinding flash of light and immediately rushed towards the center of the village. Guided by Menma's chakra, determination etched firmly into their features. I'd like you to explain to me why you have the Sharingan. Menma gulped, as silently as he could manage. I'm not sure what you mean, sir. I do not possess the Sharingan. Play dumb. Play dumb. Play dumb. Tell him what he wants to hear. Only those of Uchiha descent have the Sharingan. Menma had, perhaps naively, hoped that the Uchiha may soften a bit at that confession. But to his dismay, the man before him only seemed to get angrier. I think you do. I saw your eyes myself. If you don't believe me, I could get a Yamanaka to project the memory for you to see. Sasuke's glare only hardened, as if promising that it would be much worse for him if he continued to play dumb. Do I need to prove to you what I saw? No, sir. A sick, twisted kind of smirk spread across the Uchiha's lips. Wonderful. However, that brings us back to my first question. Why do you have the Sharingan? Menma breathed in, slowly, taking all the time he could. Mama and Papa were coming. He could feel them approaching fast. All he needed was to stall for another 2 minutes at most. That's all. He could do that much. He squared his shoulders. My possession of the Sharingan isn't any of your concern. The other bristled, chakra practically exploding out in sharp edges. As his eyes bled back into red. Oh. How do you suppose so? You may be the Uchiha clan head in this universe. I, however, do not belong in this universe. Thus, you have no right to demand any information from me. Mama and Papa were close. So excruciatingly close. Just a little more. Kid, Sasuke chuckled darkly. Amused. I don't need the right to do anything. I will pry the answers from you through torture if I need to. Fuck. The door burst open behind Menma, drawing the attention of both occupants in the room. Menma sighed in pure, unsaturated relief as Naruto and Sasuke Uchimaki strode into the room. Care to repeat that? Naruto asked with glowing red eyes, hair floating and roiling like snakes behind him. Our chapter closes here, for now. But the story never truly ends in the Animeverse. Subscribe to follow the next journey, share your ideas or your favorite fanfic moments below, and pass this along to a fellow anime dreamer. Until we meet again, stay inspired, stay curious. Sit back and enjoy the rest of my gameplay, and may your day, night, or anything in between be a good one. Until we meet again.